Hi everyone. So today Arnav and I are going to present a paper on McDermott's type inequalities for graph-dependent variables and stability bounds. This paper was presented by the following people in NeurIPS 2019. Yeah, yeah. So we're going to be covering some of these topics. So let's just get into it. Yeah. So first thing that we're going to recall is what McDermott's inequality is, and we're going to do it in slightly different terms. So first we define what Lipschitz function is. So essentially, it's the same as what we saw in class. What we're doing here is that if for the ith argument, if by changing the ith argument of a function, the difference between the two changes by a maximum of ci, then the whole vector c is actually the function is called c Lipschitz, where C actually represents the vector. And then this is the following is the McDermott's inequality, where which basically just means that the probability of the function being t times more than the mean is less than equal to exponential minus 2t square divided by squared L2 norm of C, as you can see on the screen. So now we are going to go into a generalization of this inequality, and how we're going to do that is through dependency graphs. So let's see what dependency graphs are. So essentially now we are somewhat relaxing the condition of the variables being independent, right? So what we're saying here is that we don't need the variables to be independent, but what we are saying is that the variables are dependent in such a way that we know the underlying graph of their dependency. So essentially, if I and j are dependent on each other, then they definitely have an edge, and if I and j don't have an edge, then they are independent. So that's what a dependency graph is. Let's look at an example. And the vertices of that graph represents the random variables. Yeah. So consider a housing society where uh, there is a street light between every two neighboring houses, and for the street light to be on, you need a consent of both the neighbors, right? So and we also assume that the consent of all the houses are independent of each other. In that situation, you would let xi represent the consent of the ith house owner, and zi represent the state of the light. So you can in simple terms say that zi is equal to is a function of xi plus 1 and xi. Moving on. Yeah, so if we were to assume that those houses were arranged in a circular fashion, which is actually pretty common, you would notice that then the dependency variables in the random variable zi, the dependency graph of the random variable zi would look something like this, because zi is actually dependent on zi plus 1 through the random variable xi plus 1, but it's not dependent on random variable zi is not dependent on zi plus 2 because it doesn't have any x in common, right? So it will look like this. And now we're going to see how we can actually get inequalities for things like this.
Hello. So now we'll be talking about acyclic in the acyclic case first. We'll then move on to the general graph case. Initially, we just, as I said, stick to a tree. Now here again, we set f to be a C Lipschitz function, where G is the dependency graph of the random vector x. Here we state a very powerful inequality that fx will be away from its mean from at a distance of t with a probability less than exponential of this rather complicated term. We will see a brief proof sketch of how this is done. So initially, we actually make a small lemma which will help us in making the in this proof. So we initially construct given a tree, we actually construct a dependency tree such that the root is vertex n, and its c is the minimum amongst all the ci's of the vertices, and the vertices are arranged such that j is a descendant of I only if j is less than I, and we define this set S for any I such that it is I plus 1 to n, both included, minus the parent of I. And using this notation, we state this very powerful lemma where we say for x in the range of S equals y conditional on x of I equals to I, which is the same if we change the ith variable. Now this is pretty powerful. We'll just see a few examples of this. So as can be seen here, this is the first case, for example, where we just change x1, we change x1 to x1 dash. In this case, we can actually say that the probability that 2, 4, 5, 6, which are these vertices, are the same even if we change x1. And this makes sense because 1 is independent of these variables. And similarly for 2, we can see that 3, 4, and 6 are also independent of this. Now 1 is also independent of this, but in this case we don't actually need to we are not stating 1, so that is anyway works out. Now, to complete the proof, we define two variables y and z such that yi is equal to xi for all, where zi and zi is just slightly different, where it's just changed to in the ith position, and for s it is identical. And we have this relation for I plus 1 to n. And similarly for z, we also have the similar relation since we know that z and y are common over here. Yeah, so it's only different on I and P of I. Yeah. And similarly, using that first lemma, we can conclude these relations. We could have gone into the proof, but it is a rather simple step, and so we are leaving it here as an exercise. And finally, using these lemmas, we finally are able to conclude this. And now from here, we apply a simple McDermott's to get this, which was the lemma that we had shown here, as we had shown here, and now we have proved it. And now we'll move on to the case where it is a forest. On to you, Ravi.
Yeah. So how it changes? So like we already saw the inequality when the dependency graph was a tree. So it just changes a little bit when it's a forest. And what really happens is that for every component of the graph that you have this summation over the C min of each of those components, right? So here C min of I represents that it's the minimum C in the ith component. And we can immediately see that this is a generalization of the previous one, because if you were to consider a tree that will just have one component, and you'll get the previous inequality. And the proof of this is very similar to what I have said before, but due to the time constraints of the video, we're going to skip that. Yeah, so now we're going to be moving towards building McDermott's concentration for general graphs, general dependency graphs, right? And the first thing we need for that is the definition. So we already have an inequality for forest, and now we're going to see how we can represent a general graph as a forest, and then somehow get an inequality that's in some sense similar to the previous one. So let's say we're given a graph G, then any forest F is a forest approximation of the graph if there's a mapping from G vertices. Every vertex of G is mapped to a vertex of F, and if if there's an edge between two vertices of G, then there's also an edge between their mappings in F, right? That does make sense, right? So intuitively, you can think of this as bucketing of the vertices of the graph G, and you get an edge between two buckets if any of the vertices in the first bucket is adjacent to any of the vertices in the second bucket. So that's what the forest approximation means. Moving on. Yeah, so now depending on the forest based on the forest approximations, we defined a statistic called forest complexity. So the forest complexity of a graph is essentially just this quantity, and that's just phi inverse of u. Phi inverse of u essentially means that for a vertex u in the forest, how many vertices in G are mapped to u, right? That makes sense, right? And then we get this quantity, and you may think that this quantity is actually quite similar to one of the terms that was appearing in the previous inequality, and we'll see how they're somewhat related. Yeah, so if you just see here, if you take C common, if you were to assume that all C is the same for all of the all of J and I, then you could just take it common, and you'd see how the two things actually kind of look similar. uh Moving on. Yeah, next. Yeah, so the idea here is that while just go to the previous slide. Yeah, so the idea here is that we may not always be able to calculate the exact forest complexity of a graph, but if we get like a good forest approximation of the graph, then we could just use that as an upper bound, and the McDermott's inequality of general graphs works out. So now we're going to see what that inequality looks like. Yeah, so here, as you can see, this inequality actually looks a little bit like the forest inequality, just just assume that you've taken C common and you're just using the most conservative estimate of C, which is the max C, right? So C infinity is just the max norm, which is, so it's you're using the max C square, and then this forest complexity term looks like the term that we already had there for each edge and then for each component. So this inequality kind of works out. The exact proof we are again leaving for because of the time constraints, but you can check out the paper if you're interested. But intuitively, I think it does make a little bit of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so now we'll move on to illustrations and examples. As can be seen, we have given we have given a cycle as an example here. One very interesting application of this was actually pointed out by Ravi at the very start of the presentation with the streets and the lightings. So as can be seen here, we are bucketing this even cycle into four vertices. Here there is one, here we take two, here we take two, and again here we take one, and these are bucketed in this manner to get a path of length 4, and here these 1 2 2 1 are the phi inverse values. Similarly, here for a pentagon we can actually again bucket them into groups of 2s and 1s. This can be seen here again we manage 1 2 and 2. So as can be seen, this also results in a forest complexity that is less than order of n. Now this is again comparable to Jansen's result, which is a very famous bound in concentration inequalities for dependent variables. We can also do it for more complicated graphs like grids. These also have a variety of applications, which we are not elaborating here. But here we do kind of a bucketing in this manner where this star corresponds to this, these two correspond to this bucket, these three correspond to this bucket, these four correspond to this, and similarly we go on and on and until we reach to one. Now, as can be seen here, these are linearly increasing terms, and we have to consider the square of the summation for every term. So we actually get a quadratic term which is actually summed n times. So sorry, m times. So we actually get a forest approximation on the order of m cube. But since but since n is m square, we actually have a forest approximation of O of n to the power 1.5. Now we'll move on to some applications in real life of these McDermott type inequalities, which will be handled by Ravi. On to you, Ravi.
Yeah, so the first application we look at is algorithmic stability, and then Arnav is going to prove another inequality which kind of uses the bound that we get here. So again, we'll be skipping over some of the proofs because of the time constraint, but let's just look at the problem setup. So first thing is that it's a supervised learning setup. We have a training set like we usually do. There are n training data points, and each of those data points belongs to a marginal distribution D. But the difference here is that instead of you assuming that all of the data points are independent, we assume that these data points have a known dependency graph G, and this dependency graph is known for us for the analysis of the algorithm, right? And then we also assume that we know the objective function. Next. L is the known objective function. Then we have the hypothesis. So we want to test, like we want to find out how good of our hypothesis F is, right? F is the hypothesis. And then there are two terms: empirical error. This is the error that we can see, that we can find out. And then there's the generalization error. Generalization error is which is in some sense the true error, but we don't know this. So what our objective here is that we want to upper bound the generalization error, because that's the real thing that we care about, right? Empirical error is noisy and we don't really care about that. We care about generalization error, so we want to upper bound generalization error in terms of empirical error and then some other known quantities, and we'll do this using algorithmic stability. Yeah, so the first thing we see is what is a uniformly stable algorithm. So a algorithm is called beta and uniformly stable. As you can see here, it's called beta and uniformly stable with respect to the loss function L if the loss that you get with the algorithm with the data set S and the loss that you get with removing any of the data points, right? So if the difference of that loss for any data point is less than beta n, right? So just reiterating, what I'm saying here is that if the maximum change in loss that you see, after removing a data point from your training data, if that is less than beta n for n data points, then we say that our algorithm is beta n stable, beta n uniformly stable. Yeah. So now we will analyze this quantity. I'll just call this quantity phi sub a s as phi. So phi is essentially the difference between these two quantities, the generalization error and the empirical error. So first we'll show a tail bound for phi, and we'll use McDermott's inequality, McDermott's type inequality for general dependency graph in an interesting way to do this. Then we will get an upper bound for the expected value of phi, and we combine these results to actually get the objective. Our objective, again, to remind you, is to upper bound r of f in terms of r hat of f. Yeah. So first, using s- so first, just what we do is to get this Lipschitz condition, the one that is right here. So this says that the phi for a, the phi for s, and the phi for s dash is actually less than equal to 4 beta n plus m by n, right? So this acts like the Lipschitz condition for us, and then we use this Lipschitz condition in the McDermott's bound for general dependency graphs that we obtained. And as you can see, if we just substitute this upper bound on C here, we'll get the inequality at the top right here, the inequality in the lemma 4.2. So you can just see that on substituting this as C, we get that inequality. And yeah, that gives us this particular tail bound. Yeah. So now we bound the expected value of phi in an interesting way. So, well, let me just first say the bound. So the bound is 2 beta n delta. What beta and delta represents? Beta and delta, as you can see in the last line of lemma 4.3, it's the maximum over all betas from beta, like all betas such as beta n minus 1, beta n minus 2, up till beta n minus delta, right? So it's the maximum over all of those betas, and that beta appears here. Maximum of those betas appears here, and that is multiplied by delta plus 1, right? So you can assume beta, recall, is the beta that appears in the uniformly stable, the definition of uniformly stable. So as you can see, like, I'm not going to tell you the proof here, but intuitively it makes, I think one could imagine the proof actually tries to remove some of the vertices and some of the data points, such as to make the try to remove the dependencies in the graph, and that's how we get this upper bound on the expected value of beta. Yeah, clearly combining these two, like, yeah. So when we say this when we take this tail inequality and we take the upper bound on the expected value, then we get like, we just say to that with at least probability 1 minus delta. So we're saying the error setting the error probability as delta, and just doing the required algebra, substituting the expected the upper bound and the expected value, we get this inequality. And this is the inequality that's very essential. This is the inequality that's actually going to tell us how our algorithm is doing, right? So just to summarize, we what we have proved now is that we proved that the generalization error in algorithm for dependent variables, dependent training points, is actually upper bounded by this quantity. And we've done this using the McDermott's inequality for general graphs that we discovered. Now on to Arnav.
Yeah, so we'll just learn one more example of this inequality, and then we'll conclude our presentation. So now we consider another very useful application of graphical variables, which is M-dependent data. This basically implies, as can be seen from the dependency graph below, that the only variables that a particular point can be dependent on are at a distance m from it, on from the left or right. As can you see, this is only adjacent to two things. This vertex is only adjacent to two of the vertices ahead and below. And so we now apply first approximation on this. As can be seen, we can club these into m particular small m buckets, which are then formed here into four distinct buckets. And as can be seen, since the edges are just m distance away, For example, a vertex between 1 and m can never be connected to any vertex between 2m plus 1 and 3m. Therefore, we'll get a path. And by simply applying the forest complexity for this tree, we get that this is less than O of nm. And now using this inequality and just substituting this, we just substitute this over here in this inequality to get the algorithmic stability bound for m dependent variables as this term. And I think now we can conclude. We This project was done for E6112, topics in random processes and concentrations, and we are signing off.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you all.